afternoon, everybody, and welcome to EuropaBio's last webinar of this year. We are delighted to welcome you to a topic that has been close to our hearts all year, which is mRNA, a voyage of discovery and celebration. It's a wonderful way to end our anniversary year this year after a huge amount of work across all countries and all sectors. And we are going to have a look at how messenger RNA has both changed our lives, but also substantially expanded our vocabulary. And before I can even start, I need to say a big thank you to everybody that has contributed into the development and delivery of mRNA, because this has been a huge global effort. And today's webinar really brings together 4 different types of contribution into the delivery of mRNA as a vaccine and as a future therapeutic. So we have a short recorded interview with Ingmar Hoerr, who really helped get things going with his first doctoral research into mRNA and how its use as a potential therapeutic. We also have Dhaval Patel from Catalent, who's really going to talk about how we were able to industrialize and scale up the production of mRNA. Then we will have Stephen Lockhart from Pfizer, who will need no introduction as the company that helped drive, alongside BioNTech, how mRNA really built up the vaccine response to COVID this year. And then finally, when we move to our discussion session, we will welcome Peter Heinrich from BioDeutschland, who will really join us to talk about the impact that the development of mRNA has had on the sort of industrial and small company landscape worldwide, really. We already have lots of questions submitted, and we will try to answer as many of those as possible in the webinar itself, but please don't hesitate to continue submitting more questions through the chat function. Can we have the next slide, please, Martina? Lovely. We have over 250 participants today, and we are really glad you could join us, because it's a really interesting look at where mRNA came from and why, and how we've managed to make it the tool that it is today in the response to COVID. The webinar will be recorded, so don't worry if you don't see it all. You can come and watch it again, and we will share this. We will share the link with all attendees following today's webinar. So next slide, please. I've already given you a short introduction to our speakers. So what I'm going to do now is ask Martina to switch off the slides, and I'm going to ask her then to play our first recording that we had with Ingmar Hoerr that we made a couple of weeks ago about his role in the early stage research into the applications of mRNA. So take it away, Martina.
I am delighted that Ingmar Hoerr can join us for a short interview today. And Ingmar will be known to many people as one of the first researchers who recognised and acted upon the potential of mRNA as a therapeutic. And this was way back in the day when the millennium bug was more of an issue for us than COVID. Ingmar, could you introduce yourself and share with the audience your early work during your doctorate on mRNA?
Yeah, hello, I'm Ingmar Hoerr. I was a PhD student at Tübingen University, and this was exactly the time after my PhD when we started with CureVac, because the PhD topic was RNA research at that time, which was very special. Nobody else was doing this kind of research, and it was something which was very new to the folks at that time.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. And COVID was not even the glint in the eye of virologists back in 2000. So where were you looking for the potential of mRNA applications?
Well, where I came from, the lab, folks that were dealing with cancer. Cancer was the hot topic at that time. And cancer, of course, is still a hot topic today as well, because there's no cure against malignant cancer, very dangerous cancer. And so we were really dedicated to work on cancer. And I thought at that time RNA is a perfect tool, because RNA can be adapted to different cancers, and cancer cannot escape from the treatment of RNA. And that was the reason why we started with cancer.
No, that's a really interesting insight. And as you developed the patents linked to mRNA, which were indeed some of the first patents associated with it, what were you looking at key points to protect to enable further exploitation?
Yeah, one of the reasons why RNA was not in the scientific community was the assumption that RNA is completely unstable. So scientists, they hated to work with RNA because indeed RNA is very unstable. If you have, for example, if it goes directly into the mouse, into the air, and if you breathe out, then there are a lot of so-called RNAs as enzymes. They can destroy the RNA, and they easily destroy the RNA. But chemically, RNA is very stable. You can heat up RNA to 100 centigrades, and that's no problem for RNA. So, and I think this was misleading. Scientists were thinking RNA is unstable, which was not. Chemically, it's very stable. And therefore, nobody was really working with RNA. And we were the first, discovering RNA is that stable. You can work it if you just avoid that breathing air is going into the fluids, for example. So therefore, we loved to work with RNA, and RNA became our friend. So this was maybe the impact at the very beginning, that we could work with RNA, and RNA kept stable enough.
No, that's great. It must have been really exciting. And this was a really new technology to bring to investors as you started to try and develop it further. What was their reception and enthusiasm? Because this is obviously a very novel technology, and of course it's all measured in how much money you can develop to work on it further.
Yeah. Exactly. Investors, they didn't know anything about RNA. What they know is that RNA is unstable, is completely crap. So I was going to a lot of professional investors. They were really telling me, sorry, guy, I don't believe you. It's crap. Why you should in Tübingen, a small little town of Tübingen, you should doing this kind of invention? I don't believe you. No. So this was more a kind of believage. I was a kind of young guy. Nobody knew my name at that time. Although I have data, I had data in my PhD work clearly indicating that RNA is completely stable. You can work with RNA. It was more a kind of belief question. And it was more really interesting to talk about technology at that time, because we were doing the natural way. So we looked up how nature is stabilizing RNA, because it's on our body. It's every day. It's there. So and there's a kind of unstable RNA and stable RNA. And we just looked how the body is doing that. And we found out there are some sequence elements in the RNA which stabilize the RNA. So we went the natural way. We didn't use any chemical modification as biotech, for example, is doing this today. We worked on the natural modifications, and this was the way how we could go forward, and also talk to scientists and get the interest of some scientists to follow our pathway.
No, that's great. It's always really great to hear that nature, having worked on it for such a long time before we started working on it, kind of knew the answer already, which is so often the case. And if we look now, where we are today, headlines are dominated by the current pandemic, but we already hear about other applications which are starting to benefit patients. Where do you see the biggest impact in the future, particularly in unmet medical needs worldwide?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a big impact now in the COVID scenario, which we have, that there are lots of mutations coming up, and it's quite easy and suitable to follow up these mutations with RNA technology. So you can do within less than a half a year timeline, you can adapt the vaccine and you get a new modality of the vaccine. So therefore, it's hard for the virus to escape from it. Of course, it will be there, but we can follow up it. And this is the same for cancer. When we started everything, cancer is a very deadly disease. And the reason is that the cancer cells, they're kind of intelligent. And cancer cells, they can hide themselves from the immune system, which is a high weapon we have all in our body. So cancer cells hide themselves from the immune system. And what we can do is we can teach the immune system to detect the cancer cells. So this is a teaching, actually, what we do. The same we do it for COVID, and the new COVID strain is also a kind of teaching, and we can do the same for cancer. So if cancer is mutating away, and cancer mutates every day more or less, and we can teach the body through an adapted vaccine how to treat the cancer, how to combat against the cancer. So I think the future will be there won't be any escape of the cancer. Cancer will be always kind of there, but it has always to combat with the body's defense. So therefore, the cancer is inhibited to grow. And that's the thing what we really want to have. So we can live with our cancer, a kind of chronic disease, but the cancer is not going malignant, it's not going to grow and destroy organs. And I think that's some of the vision. So it's not possible to get rid of cancer, but it's possible to heal cancer. So that's my vision.
Oh, it's a fantastic vision, and it makes me feel very Star Trek right now. And so, so to close, my final question would be: what advice would you give to researchers to help deliver the maximum impact from their own promising advances in technology? What did you learn from the process with mRNA?
I think it's very important to trust your own research. So not giving things for given, as in the books, for example. So really first try to understand yourself what's going on in experiments. Try to use the right controls, but do it. And go your own way. I think that's a very important thing. So that was the reason why I did it with RNA. It was my way, and what I've seen was really clear to me at that time. That's a great thing. So go after your own way, believe in the visions, even when nobody else is believing that. If you see the experiments and you're a kind of natural scientist, you believe what you see, and there's no doubt about it. So you have to go forward and believe again. And then you have to get other people, other folks interested in this. Try to build teams with a lot of believers and interesting people. Try to get data as much as you can, that you can really verify what you see. Try to publish. Of course, try to get some patents for sure. That's also important at the beginning. But I think it's very important to be inspired and go your own way and not looking right or left side, but go just your way.
That's fantastic. So thank you very much, Ingmar, for being part of the webinar today. And I really hope that while we're playing this out live, you're having a great time somewhere else that's a little bit sunnier. So thank you once again.
So thanks very much indeed to Ingmar there, and apologies to some of our attendees who couldn't hear the audio on that. We had some people that could and some people that couldn't, which makes it very exciting to try and work out why we had a problem. But I'm going to move to our next live speaker now, who luckily is in the room with us in a very real and virtual way. So I'm going to introduce Dhaval Patel from Catalent Biologics, who really and Catalent have been hugely involved in the scale up and manufacture of messenger RNA vaccines. So Dhaval, do you want to talk us through the Catalent experience in bringing mRNA to the masses?
Certainly. Hello, everybody. This is Dhaval Patel. I'm from Catalent, responsible for tech transfer on the drug product side. So I'm going to focus on how we as a Catalent made it possible to get this vaccine to the market this quickly. Obviously, we are a CDMO, contract development manufacturing organization. So we work with our customers, and that is one of the big factor why we were able to get this to the market in the very short time frame. So the key area that I would like to focus here on why it's possible, or it was possible, is our willingness to invest at risk, and is one point where some of the expansion at our within our multiple sites and the acquisition that was in play was pre-planned. Obviously, nobody predicted pandemic, but that made us to be in a position where we were able to address the need and help our customers scale up in the short time frame that they needed it to help the patients and the world in this case. That as we speak, we have delivered more than 1 billion doses of COVID vaccine so far, manufactured at only our one in Bloomington, Indiana, in US. So that is quite an achievement that we as a Catalent team are very proud of. And the second point I would like to add why we made it possible is our prior experience is with over like 150 plus molecules, not just mRNA, it's protein, some of the small molecules and other molecules that we have experience working with and scaling up from as low as like 1 or 2 liter up to 2,500 plus liters of products that we scale up across our facilities in the globe. And it's just like that experience that keeps us going, and why our customers coming back to us with like this kind of need when the pandemic happened, on how quickly obviously they developed the molecule, but they needed expertise or the partner that have worked in that scale or capacity, and that can help them quickly get to the market. So that way we can obviously initial response was to stop the spread of COVID, and eventually to see how quickly we can produce more doses, so that way we can get the population across the globe vaccinated. So that's what our end goal is at this point. But yeah, it's our experience where we have the team of people obviously at certain sites who are directly in, but at the same time, the other team members, they are playing a part on the development side as well. So Catalent has been working. One example is obviously Moderna, that we have been partnering with them since 2016. That was our first partnership, where we had partnered with them on the early phase clinic to indicate at the time. But eventually, when the COVID occurs and Moderna have found a breakthrough, obviously they're like, hey, I know we have been working in a partnership for a long time. This is the time to now execute, that we need to scale up. And that's where like it's our prior experience helped, and the relationship that we built with our customer. As a result of that, like earlier in this year, April this year, like Moderna and Catalent announced a long-term strategic partnership as well, to help with obviously COVID, and at the same time some other molecules that they have it in their pipeline. So yeah, it's a definitely fascinating on where we were as a Catalent a couple years ago, and how far along we have come right now with this experience. And I specifically more involved in Bloomington site, so where we are making this. I can speak for it, that like one of the point that like I mentioned, invest at risk. So that's where like we had an expansion plan to increase our capacity based on how our business was growing, but the plan was long term. As we all know, we can't the manufacturing facilities can't be made overnight. So like the plan was to get the manufacturing facility ready, or the additional capacity rather ready in 18 to 24 month plan. But with the when the COVID hit, we were able to collaborate with our vendors and our suppliers and sub-suppliers to stretch or decrease that timeline and get ready in 9 months. So the initial timeline was to get that facility ready by this like December of 2021, but instead we get that ready in December of 2020, and started manufacturing right around Christmas time last year. So yeah, it's quite fascinating on like collaboration that showed with our vendors, and 24/7 support of the workers. They were there on site as well to get this facility ready, plus our partner in Europe. Like we have the filling technology we use is isolator technology, and those are being made by Optima in Germany. So they played a huge role as well. They understood the impact or the role that they're going to play in this expansion, and how quickly that they needed to act as well, and they supported us very well, and obviously the collaboration between the government on the both side as well. As we all know, that majority of the 2020 was in lockdown, and it helped us that government involvement to get this isolator technology like on a plane overnight directly to deliver to US and clear all the customs. So it's like entire team was involved with one goal in mind to do how quickly we can end pandemic, and it's just like that we as a Catalan take proud of it, and then couldn't thank our all this previous relationship enough to be able to put us in the position that we can help the world hopefully pretty soon COVID free. So yeah, it's like always, like we always say at Catalan, like it's just why customers are trusting on us and believing in us and coming back is like kind of put those down, like 3 points that I mentioned is like willingness to invest at risk, our prior experience on scaling up from small scale or early clinical to the commercial phase, and the unprecedented levels of collaboration that we have with our vendor and our sub-suppliers. Thank you.
No, thanks very much indeed, Darwell. And it really is like a whole symphony orchestra full of different people collaborating. So, and all of them need to work for it to actually have a happy outcome. So it was super interesting learning about how Catalan addressed that and how it's scaled up on a global basis. So we're going to go to our last speaker now, who is Stephen Lockhart from Pfizer. And of course, Pfizer is a household name associated with vaccine development now. Stephen's going to talk a little bit about the focus on clinical development that enabled mRNA to get to market and get into patients at an astonishingly quick time. So Stephen, over to you.
Thank you very much, Claire. Well, I think Darwell's already made the point, really, that you have to have everything ready, but you don't know what's coming. And it's really a question of pulling together stuff that you already have, but maybe you didn't even know it was going to be useful specifically for COVID. So I think that's been a key element. And I don't really want to pull out just clinical development, because development all fits together. There is no one element of vaccine development or any product development that really completely stands alone. You're all dependent on each other. And to that point, I think many things enabled us to be ready. The first was, of course, the technology that biotech had been developing, and they've spent, they didn't invent that overnight. I mean, they've spent decades actually developing the mRNA technology, mainly with a view to doing oncology. But fortunately, we'd already built a relationship with them, because we were planning to work together, or we were already working together on making a flu mRNA vaccine, which is a target that we'll now be following as well. But that relationship and trust that we'd built up over a year or two actually was quite critical to being able to get off the ground very quickly and working well. And then on the Pfizer side, of course, we brought other capacities, huge experience in making new vaccines, many of them now coming through on the market or already been on the market for some time. A great global clinical product development group with deep experience around the world that was able to quickly pick up the work in doing clinical trials. And manufacturing. I want to pull out manufacturing because they were able to pivot, and I hasten to add, we've also used CMOs, so it's not only internal, but within Pfizer, a huge experience in manufacturing and logistics that was able to pivot very rapidly towards the COVID vaccine. Now, working together, I mentioned, everything's important: regulatory, manufacturing, clinical, assays, even things like the financial support. So how do you channel the right money to the right place very fast, for example, for trialists? The whole organization really has capacity that comes together to enable that. Now, I want to mention a couple of things additionally that were important. One is the great contribution of the regulatory authorities. I particularly want to pull out the FDA, frankly, but other regulatory authorities around the world were also very supportive, in the sense that they were able to provide guidance at an early stage about exactly what they would need to see in order to get rapid approval. And that enabled us to focus very rapidly on exactly what was needed. And I want to make the point, they didn't give us an easy ride. I mean, I think there were many people who thought maybe they could have set the bar a little bit lower, but I totally understand the need to have tight regulatory standards, and that enables people to have confidence in the product once it's available. Related to that, we made a very, very deliberate focus to maintain our quality standards exactly as they are. So we didn't say, it's COVID, we can do that a little bit differently. All we did in terms of doing things fast was to do things in parallel and to do things with reduced review times, take out the white space, be ready in advance with the next steps on the basis of assumptions. If the assumptions change, then the next steps change, but you have to be ready for it at each stage, not getting to a point, then say, well, now we've seen a bit of data, maybe we'll do it instead it was, we're going to have data at that point. These are the things we will do in certain circumstances. Now, I know that's a way we try and work all the time, but this was particularly important for the COVID response. I think it's going to be difficult. It would be difficult to apply the ways we've all worked to routine practice in product development. But I think there are some things we can learn. I think we're learning a lot about streamlining processes. And I know everybody, it's been the byword for decades, hasn't it? You know, process enhancements. But I think this really will lead to ways where we can work out what worked well in terms of moving things in parallel and being ready in advance, and that will play through. We've also, around the world, not only Pfizer, but I think all companies involved have developed a great deal of expertise. We've brought in new people who maybe hadn't worked so much on vaccine development, or maybe not at all on vaccine development before, or had done some, and we've sharpened their skills over the last 18 months to 2 years. So we now have a huge number of people very experienced in vaccine development around the world that will undoubtedly help contribute towards future things to do. I'll leave it there now, Claire, but just a few thoughts about the impact that it's had on the way we work.
No, thank you so much, Stephen. And that reminds me of when we were preparing for this, and you were saying about how much new institutional knowledge has been developed. You know, it's been developed incredibly quickly in response to the pandemic. And so you've been able to leverage existing institutional knowledge, but a huge amount of new learning has come into play that will be inside the system now for future responses, which is a really amazing thing to think about.
Yes, absolutely correct. Thank you.
So I'd like to thank all of our speakers for their very short introductory sort of pitches to you guys. And what I'm going to do now is we're going to move to a discussion session where we have all of our speakers with us. And joining us specifically for this is Peter Heinrich from Bio Deutschland, who really brings in a very specific expertise in terms of the industrial landscape that has grown up in response to mRNA developments. So Peter, before we go to the rest of the discussion panel, do you want to give your introductory statements about, you know, impact on commercial life sciences from COVID responses?
Thank you, Claire. I'm happy to do that. So we have learned from the previous speakers, especially from Ingmar Hoerr, that biotech has played a leading role during the pandemic. Besides Moderna in the US, there are 4 leading other companies, all based in Europe, developing messenger RNA therapeutics. To name CureVac, biotech, E3 in Germany, and also Etherna in Belgium. Not surprisingly, beyond the frontrunners, the messenger RNA space is represented by a number of smaller European players, as well as suppliers of the production components and the lipid nanoparticles. This growing number of small European biotechs working on the development of new delivery technologies are extremely important pillars for the further development of this new therapeutic area. The strong validation of messenger RNA technology through the development of COVID-19 vaccines resulted in a major boost of interest from investors, but also from large-cap pharma companies. Another point I want to mention is that while the COVID-19 pandemic prioritized the development of vaccine against infectious diseases, the ultimate promise of messenger RNA technology from the very beginning was a possibility to produce any protein in any tissue and thus to treat essentially any disease, including cancer, heart diseases, nerve diseases, and many others. Although this would require additional delivery options and potentially different variations of messenger RNA molecules. Among other applications, the most advanced in the clinical studies are messenger RNA vaccines against different types of cancer, while expression of the therapeutic proteins, such as cytokines and antibodies, could be another attractive opportunity in oncology, especially for small and medium-sized companies. Let me briefly address the market potential. According to market observers, messenger RNA technology is turning into a multi-billion-dollar business. The US investment bank Berenberg Capital Markets predicts that the market for messenger RNA drugs will grow to $88 billion a year by 2030, and also generate a total revenue of $40-60 billion by the end of the 2020s. According to the forecast, manufacturers will generate just under a fifth of sales in 2030 from COVID vaccines, and another fifth from other messenger RNA vaccines. The manufacturers will generate more than half of the future income from messenger RNA applications against cancer, autoimmune diseases, and protein therapies, according to the analyst Jiquan Xu from Berenberg. Berenberg expects that today's pioneers will continue to dominate the market for the time being. BioNTech, Moderna, and maybe also CureVac will lead the revolution, Berenberg predicts. The messenger RNA technology is novel and difficult to develop. Only a few studied it intensively before the pandemic. And if you look at the history of medicine, it often takes decades for other companies to catch up with such new developments. One of the two German pioneers should have the best chances, the Berenberg analyst said. BioNTech could play a similar role in the pharmaceutical industry as Tesla or Apple in their industries. But the classic European chemical company are also playing a major role in the messenger RNA field, like the German chemical company Evonik, as a key supplier of the lipids needed to deliver messenger RNA agents to the cells. Evonik's market potential for these lipid systems is estimated to be more than $5 billion by 2026. In a joint project with Stanford University, the company wants to develop a method for the targeted administration of messenger RNA to different tissues and organs. More than 150 different messenger RNA-based treatments and vaccines are currently in development worldwide, with small teams often driving the innovation. Around half of the studies are being prepared in North America, the other half in Europe. Meanwhile, pharmaceutical companies are on the lookout of partners. And I predict that in the next few years, we will see a number of new startups in Europe working on new therapeutic approaches based on messenger RNA technology and getting sufficient funding from both the public and the venture side. Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much, Peter. I think it was really nice to be able to bring in the impact that this has on industrial development, because it would be one story if we hadn't had the COVID outbreak, and another one that we have right now with the pandemic and the response to that. So I'm going to ask our other panel members to switch their cameras back on, so Darrell and Stephen, and that would be great. But while you're doing that, I'm going to ask Peter the first question, linked essentially directly to your statement. You know, it's interesting to recognise the significance of the commercial response to COVID. So, and you already mentioned Evonik. We're delighted, another EuropaBio member. But what other sections of the biotech industry have been able to grow in response to this?
You know, as we heard in the beginning, we see an enormous growth of the biomanufacturing field. All the CDMOs dealing with manufacturing of biomolecules will have advantages of this new technology. We see a lot of drug delivery companies providing delivery systems. We see a number of companies developing diagnostic test systems for the COVID pandemic, and also the companies offering services in preclinical and clinical development will have big advantages. And another point, what I've observed over the last 2 years is that the European patent applications in 2020 for vaccines and therapeutics stand out for the product for the greatest growth among the top 10 technology field, with a growth rate of 10.2% compared to the year before. So this is also a consequence of the pandemic and a consequence of the rapid development of this technology.
No, it's amazing because I mean, I started out sort of back in the early 2000s where it was the first big boom of commercial biotech, particularly in small companies. And it was fascinating to watch what factors influenced it then. And now we're seeing a different set of factors influencing another sort of radical alteration in the landscape for small companies in particular. But I think your comment on the logistics brings us very nicely to the second question, and indeed also one that has come in from the audience. And so I'd go back to Davel, hopefully, to answer this one. The question we have from the audience is, what research is ongoing with cold storage logistics for mRNA vaccines, given that this is a constraint on their global delivery?
Certainly. So I think I can speak from a manufacturing side. Obviously, on the development side, I would leave up to Stephen if you want to add anything on or our partners, because we are they are working on the development phase. On a manufacturing front, like what we focus on is the requirement that, like, once the product is manufactured, what condition and what temperature that it needs to be stored. So we have expanded our capacity on that front as well by having say like a third-party storage to meet the need until some of the other like development can be made on this, so that way this vaccine is stable at normal storage condition, which is like 5 degrees Celsius, like any other biologics or vaccine. So the work is in progress. I can at least tell you that. Based on our discussion with our partners, unfortunately, won't be able to share more detail, but at least that's where we focused from a manufacturing partner perspective. I don't know if that answered the question.
No, I think it's really great because it's often never the technology that's the bottleneck to the answer. It's the other aspects. So, Stephen, I don't know if you wanted to add anything in there from a sort of cold storage perspective, if that falls into your area of expertise.
Yeah, it's not really my area of expertise, but clearly, you know, we took a decision early on to prioritize urgent large-scale supply. You know, we're used to launching our vaccines in nice pre-filled syringes, stable in a cold chain, and so on. That really wasn't an option at this point, and in fact, if you think about the volume of material that has to be shipped, there are actually advantages to frozen multi-dose vials. The number of thousands and thousands of doses that we can fit into a box is always astonishes me, and for a pandemic situation, that's quite useful. The cold chain is manageable in most middle and higher income countries. Obviously, the requirement for long term frozen storage is an issue in lower middle income countries, and we're aware of that. We are close to having a formulation available for adults. It's actually very similar to the one we're just launching in children, that has somewhat more conventional cold chain stability. So that is a priority. Yes, we will work on that, and clearly that's also going to be important if we're going to use these technologies for other more common and less urgent clinical conditions. Understood. Yeah.
No, that's right. So we can expect to see it arrive, and I think a lot of people I've spoken to sort of said it was important to get the volume out there first, and then work on how you refine it and get it further. But let me come back to
if I may add real quick, Claire, on that point. It's when the pandemic hit, obviously we as a manufacturer and the development partner, they were working on see how quickly we can develop it. And as we know, majority of the biologics are more stable at the frozen condition. So that was the first step that we took, that okay, we know the stability will be there, so start with there and eventually work on it to develop more stable vaccines or treatment that we can be stored at 5 degrees C. So that was the main focus. So yes, improvements are coming, but the timeline will be decided at this point.
But I think this stays with us now about the importance of existing relationships. So can you describe some of you mentioned a few of your relationships in your opening statement, but how critical were your relationships with yourself, third-party suppliers and technical specialists?
Yeah, certainly. So those critical, as I mentioned, is pretty important to maintain. Like I touched briefly, that we have been working with Moderna as an example since 2016 for early development programs not related to COVID, and eventually when the need arises, that's where the partners trust each other that hey, we need to use this relationship to see how quickly we can get to the market. At that time, it's important for us as a manufacturer as well to let our sub-suppliers know that hey, the demand is coming, and they are reacting to that as well. Like one simple example I can share from Bloomington plant, where I more support is pre-pandemic we were around like 1,500 employees, and now we are approaching close to 4,000 employees within 18 months span. So that's just like one small example of how partners are reacting, because we do have our resourcing company that we work here locally and some of our global resource partner as well. So yes, the capacity and capability is one thing, but at the same time, you need to be able to support those with some of the automated technologies. You need that human power, like resources. So that's just like one of the small example that I wanted to use to answer your question. That it's pretty important, those pre-existing relationship that gets us to this point that where we are right now.
No, I think it's really interesting as well, because of course COVID as well brought itself massive supply chain disruption. So you suddenly had a huge fracture of global access. And I know in Europe, it started a huge conversation about the resilience of the medical supply chain. So not just reshoring everything back to Europe, but creating very robust global supply, which is obviously going to benefit everybody. But Stephen, let me come back to you as well, because the significance of existing knowledge was very clear, but this doesn't just apply into mRNA or vaccine manufacture. What other aspects of the sort of vaccine response in the pandemic were critical to enable the mRNA to actually come into play? Because I know we talked about this bit before as well, with regards to learning from the SARS experience.
Yeah, well, no, I think that's right, and amongst other things, I sit on an MRC board that looks at grants, and I'm very strongly supportive of the fact that we're very dependent on a very strong research and academic network. I think the manufacturers are critical to doing this fast, but we do it in an environment where knowledge is very broadly based. And I want to draw out the fact that many of the people that we are now employing come from PhD and academic type backgrounds. That's critically important. I'll answer your other question in just a second, Claire, but I just want to point out that you can't just recruit people and have them working overnight. We're in very specialist areas, and I'm very impressed by Devil's comment about how many people they've recruited. And I know our clinical department has doubled in size since February last year, but those people have to be trained into the roles, and so the existing knowledge is very important. But to come to a point I think you were making, the inputs in the COVID from the research environment, probably one of the most important, well, a couple of important ones. First of all, there's the sorry to say this to our first speaker, but actually the mod RNA, of course, is a story that's been bubbling away in an academic environment for a very long time, and very important advances made with the use of the modified RNA process. And so that's been important. And another one I want to draw attention to that we've almost all used is the work that was started some 20 years ago after the SARS outbreak. Many of us forgot about it. But I want to acknowledge the work at the NIH that has gone on since then, has led us to the structure of the antigen that I think pretty much all of the manufacturers working on the spike, based on the spike antigen, which is practically all of them in reality, have used the P2 modified spike antigen that was ready to go, because the NIH, they didn't know which coronavirus might come, but they were working on the assumption there might be a coronavirus as the next disease X, as they call it. Related to that, sorry, I'm having a flight of ideas here, Claire. I'm a great fan of CEPI, and CEPI, the Coalition for I forget what it stands for, but it's the coalition to drive forward research and support research on potential pandemic pathogens. And they've done some very important things. For example, they were supporting the work that Oxford was doing on the MERS vaccine. And MERS, we thought might be the next thing after SARS, but it sort of fizzled around and just sort of not really turned into a great pandemic. But that work was very supportive of Oxford being able to move very rapidly into their adenovirus-based vaccine. And I think I'd like to point out, I actually had the Oxford vaccine. I may work for Pfizer, but I was in the UK and the vaccine available was the Oxford vaccine, and I had it, and I was very pleased to have it. And I think that's been a great contribution, and without it, we wouldn't be at the scale of global, still not a great scale, but at the scale of global vaccination that we are today. So I think that whole environment, that whole research environment, is critically important to us being ready.
No, it's a really good point, and it was actually one of the drivers behind our 25th anniversary for EuropaBio this year anyway, to look back at just the roots of so many innovations you consider as now, but in fact they go back really far. We wouldn't be having this conversation without the Human Genome Project, without the development of high throughput sequencing. The story of mRNA goes back far, and you look at other technologies as well. So, for example, CRISPR was voted as the most innovative breakthrough in the last 25 years for industrial biotechnology, and that emerged again back in the early 2000s, late 1990s. So none of this is new, and as you say, Stephen, it relies on layers upon layer of knowledge being built, rather than just sort of somebody opens the door and takes it out when you need it. So I think I'm always really happy to see Europe's work in increasing preparedness and fundamental research to underpin these kind of things. And it'll be interesting to see what HERA does to enable Europe to be more connected in this area as well. But to answer your quick thing about CEPI, it's the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations. So there you go.
Thank you. They're good anyway. They're doing a great job.
No, but so we're going to hop across to Peter again now. I mean, we've talked, you've already seen how much Catalan has changed over the last few years. How important is it for small companies to engage in wider collaborations? We've seen the vital role that companies like Pfizer have played. So what do SMEs need to do to maximize their impact?
Yes, clear. As you know, most SMEs, most of them lack the resources to fund costly clinical trials, or they don't have the funding to build big manufacturing facilities, and they don't have any regulatory expertise which is needed to get a new therapeutic compound approved. And this is why technology partnerships with big pharma are essential to get brilliant research out of the SME laboratories on the market, where it can benefit millions of patients. So partnership is key for the success of new technologies, in a nutshell.
No, and I remember having a really nice webinar earlier this year, again with Pfizer, and they said that they learned a lot from their relationship with biotech as well, in terms of thinking more like an SME, in terms of the agility to respond to situations. So I think I'm really happy to see SMEs playing a much more critical role in leading partnerships now, which is really great. But I'm going to stay, Peter, with you, because we did have one question that came in before the start of this around intellectual property and how how people gain access to mRNA intellectual property. And you already made a comment about patent numbers going up significantly. But is all mRNA work linked to the same foundational patents now, or is there a lot of space for new IP to be developed, particularly from SMEs in this area?
Yeah, just to be honest, it's a jungle. It's a real jungle. There's a big fight on the rights, but there's still some room for innovation left. But I think, but there's a lot of room for delivery technologies. So there's some room left, but just to be honest, it's a jungle, and it could be a nightmare to get new patents approved, because the other patent owners want to protect their position. So there will be a fight on the patents, and you better team up with a strong pharma partner who can help to defend the position.
And as usual, it'll be the lawyers that make most of the money out of it at the end of the day. But some things never change. But so let's come to the last question I'd like to pitch to our panelists today. So what is your vision for mRNA in the future, each from your own area of expertise? So I'll come back to Stephen first, from the perspective of a large pharmaceutical company that was in the game for a slightly different application of mRNA originally. What vision does Pfizer hold for it?
Well, in a narrow sense, obviously, as an infectious disease vaccine company, we see that as one of the areas where there's a lot of potential. But we know biotech are also working on it on rarer, on diseases of poverty. So they're taking it to look at malaria and TB, which are difficult challenges, but ones they're in the game for, because it shares a lot in common with the oncology work that they do. Cell-mediated responses is critically important, for example, in those fields, and so they'll be working on that. So I think there's a lot of scope there. Oncology is mentioned. I think anywhere where a vaccine can be useful, it may be relevant. I think people are interested in potentially using it, for example, to look at allergy and so on. There are people working, and I don't really know much about it, about using mRNA to deliver proteins, not necessarily as antigens, but actually as therapeutic proteins. So there's huge scope there. But I do want to say one thing, perhaps to bring it down a little bit, is to say that to me, mRNA is another tool in the box. And we actually have many, many other tools that are really great. Looking a little older now, but early on in my career in vaccine development, I was very involved, and still am actually, with conjugate vaccines, for example, that I think have made a huge difference in areas like pneumococcal disease, now coming in typhoid. Straightforward adjuvanted proteins are important. There is scope in places, I think, still for viral vectored vaccines and for live attenuated in some cases, or even killed vaccines. So I think we just have to remember, this is not a miracle cure. It's great. We've already seen some of the problems with it. I think it's got a great future. But I have to say, I think we shouldn't forget the other technologies that are useful in the vaccine field.
Oh, that's great. And I remember doing the sort of LinkedIn rounds getting ready for this, and somebody posted that they were now looking at mRNA in microbiomes, which is another, it's another really super cool area that holds a lot of keys in it, I think. But so let's come back to you. From a Catalent perspective, what does mRNA, what has it unlocked, and what vision do you have for it for the future?
Certainly. So from a manufacturing partner's perspective, I can speak that the interest in mRNA technology in general, be it a therapeutic or a vaccine, it has exploded due to the approval of this mRNA vaccine. And part of the reason is the pharma industry as a whole and regulators, they are more comfortable since they have some data on safety and efficacy of how those vaccines or therapeutic application would work based on these two vaccines they are out in the market currently. And what we see as a trend is many of the new companies, they are entering this mRNA market, and even existing companies, they are expanding their pipeline. So yes, there are interest to leverage whatever the technology is out there based on this COVID vaccine, and then see if we can develop, as Stephen touched a little, like for other diseases like infectious diseases, to see if we can create or make a therapeutic application using mRNA or not. So yeah, that's where we see from a manufacturing partner perspective where industry is going, and definitely it is going to be a next generation technology, if you will, in this biologics world.
No, that's great. And I've always really loved biotech for it's a frontier technology. It's always doing something new, and you're always learning to do something new with it. So Peter, coming back to you to wrap up our questioning today. So where do you see the vision from mRNA? Either not just the technology itself, but also the impact that it's had on the industrial landscape.
From the biotech perspective, we see messenger RNA as a versatile tool that can be used for therapeutic protein replacement, gene editing, cell therapy, vaccines, and even more. Nearly any protein can be introduced via messenger RNA, enabling cellular expression of gene editing tools or antigens as needed. And additionally, sequence engineering and chemical modifications such as modified nucleoside triphosphates used during in vitro transcription, often precise control mechanism for messenger RNA performance. So with the rapid development timelines and scalable manufacturing, messenger RNA is an attractive solution for many therapeutic applications. And this will have a huge impact on the growth of small and medium-sized enterprises in the field of messenger RNA. So we see a lot of money going into this industry because it's a new field, a new area. It's not a solution for any problem we have in the disease area, but it will improve the options or add options to treat severe diseases.
Thanks very much indeed. And I think on those lovely wrap-up notes, I'm going to say thank you very much indeed to everybody who contributed into this webinar. It was super interesting, and we could have carried on all afternoon, but we all have our day jobs to get on with as well, and it's only Monday. But so I would say thank you to all our participants today. It was really great that you wanted to come along, and as I said, the recording will be available to everybody, and it will be in the public domain. So from the world of biotech and from the world of EuropaBio, we hope that you all stay well and stay vaccinated, and hope you have a good end to the year. Thank you very much indeed. Goodbye, everybody.